I'm Natasha Maidoff, and this is Artist Planet. This is my conversation with Amy Kaps, a renowned performance and visual artist living in Venice, California. Her work has been exhibited in Germany, Cuba, and many venues in Los Angeles, as well as across the United States. Her work carries an ironic tone as she playfully presents her intellectual and political reflections from a point of view of, say, a poodle, or the experience of a black and white striped form living in a fully striped world. I first met Amy at a party in Venice over 20 years ago, and once I'd seen her experimental film, The Poodle's Point of View, I knew I'd want to follow whatever Amy did next. How did you become an artist? How about that?
Right. It's a funny question because I recently had to write about that for a grant proposal, and it's like, wow, okay, in 700 words or less. I had the great fortune of being brought up in a household that really respected and revered and celebrated the arts. So as a young girl, I was sent to ballet school, tap school. We went to concerts. I even went to Leonard Bernstein's Young People's Concert. And then I had music lessons, violin, clarinet. I was always rather dramatic as a child, or at least my father used to call me Sarah Grubich or something like that, something silly like that, because I'm still very emotional. And that's been an interesting conversation with myself, the emotional versus the intellect also. And it's a balancing act. But how did I become an artist? I think one is, we're born to it, but it was always a compulsion in a way. And I did study psychology at college, but my studies led me to performing as well. I mean, my final project was actually a video, and where I enacted several psychological illnesses, actually, and had some of my friends act out different illnesses. I was a hebephrenic schizophrenic, and also like the interviewer. So after college, I realized that I really was an artist. I had been approached by Ricky McCoy, who's a black gay poet in New York City, who needed a female to be in a performance piece of his. And this was at the 15th annual Charlotte Mormon's Avant-Garde Festival. And that's pretty big. It was a pretty big deal. I mean, Allen Ginsberg was there. I mean, Charlotte Mormon used to be Yoko Ono's roommate, but I digress. Anyway, working with Ricky, this was my introduction to performance art. I didn't really even know that was an art form. And I had studied some theater and such, but I wasn't really that interested in speaking other people's words. I thought that my voice is valid and I have something to say and to show. And I went from there. I also worked in the art field in New York City for an art management consultant that exposed me to people like Laurie Anderson, United States Part 1 through 4, Twyla Tharp doing, dance with visuals by Robert Rauschenberg. I mean, it was this really incredible, exciting time in New York City in the early 80s. I got to meet Andy Warhol and Robert Rauschenberg and, handful of really influential art people. But, and then I moved to Germany and I did a lot of performance art there. I was actually able to support myself better there because in Europe, they seem to respect the arts and artists, I think just in general. Whereas here in America, it seems like, well, if you make a lot of money, then you're respected. But if not, then maybe you're just fringe. And do I survive off my art? I survive emotionally. through my art and intellectually, but I have to do other odd jobs, and I've done all kinds of jobs. Like right now, actually, through the pandemic, I've been delivering food for an office company, and I do recruiting for market research. I think, one of my philosophies is to remain flexible and enjoy the ride, and not really sweat the small stuff and stress. And I have a pretty modest lifestyle, I think, although I think it's a very rich lifestyle that I lead.
How does that affect your work to be having sort of downtown LA and Venice as a habitat, I guess,
It's great. I mean, I feel like, I'm bi-coastal kind of, and
Yeah.
it's also quite a relief to be able to move all of my stuff, my art supplies, out of my home. There's a part of me that really loves having my studio at home because, of course, then I can work anytime. But there is also an advantage to sort of separation of church and state, kind of like, and I have studio mate that I do a lot of collaborations with. And also, I think it's great to have somebody to talk to about art and your art or art in general.
You walk out into the hallway and there are other artists with other studios where you are right now?
Not so many in this building, but I mean, I walk out my door and my studio mate is there. So it's sort of like a constant dialogue. And we even started a YouTube channel and called Hibiscus TV. And, we discuss art, we make silly stuff.
Fun.
So it also seems to be a time where, after all the crap that's going on in the world and the pandemic and the political situation that was going on, it's really nice to just make beautiful things and even be silly sometimes. Silly is good. Silly is serious, silly.
That's what I love about your work is you definitely enter the political sphere through a sense of play. So, and I'd like to sort of take, how do you generate your work? Where does it come from?
Okay. Well, I mean, for me, first and foremost, art is about communication. And I realized that, it's a language, and I hope that people understand what I'm conveying, not that I make any dictates, because I truly want people to experience something and to question what they see. And I'll tell you, most of my ideas seem to come in a flash. I will get an image often, and if it interests me enough, then I will pursue it. And then it's kind of like pulling focus on a camera. The more I research, the more I work on it, the more I learn, and it evolves and develops into a full-on piece. So I do a lot of performance and installation work meanwhile, and I've worked with a lot of photographers. Photography for a performance artist is a great medium because, of course, performance art is temporal. If you didn't see it, you missed it. It's gone. Did it even happen? So documenting the work has become important. And also, actually, the whole series of Victus Verses or Living Stripes was an attempt to monetize my work in a sense, or preserve it, or give the people something they can take home.
Tell me about that. Tell me about how your whole striped art exploration has generated and what is happening and how it's evolved.
Funny enough, it actually started when I was invited to Burning Man. Actually, it started before that. I was invited to do a performance piece in Inglewood at the Beacon Arts Building, and I wanted to do a piece called Litany of Lovers, where I'm seen just in shadow. So I'm backlit and I have I had spandex in front of me, so you just saw my shadow, but I didn't have enough white spandex, so I went downtown looking for spandex. I also had like no budget, so I went to my favorite store where you have to like dig through stuff, and I found this striped fabric, and I put my hand behind it, and I could see my hand. I was like, this could work. So that was actually the first piece that I did using the striped fabric. Then somebody invited me to go to Burning Man, and I thought, okay, I had resisted for many years because I thought, hey, I live my life that way, okay? Not necessarily partying, but freedom of expression, being my own boss, all of that sort of stuff. I didn't need to drive a day to get to the hot desert and contend with the elements. But anyway, actually a curator sort of shamed me into it. She's like, an artist of our generation, you really should go to Burning Man. So a friend of mine bought me a ticket. And then while I was getting ready, I thought, well, I'm not going to just go as a spectator. I'm going to make a performance out of it. So I sewed my entire wardrobe out of the striped fabric, and then actually even did a photo shoot on the playa, which was rather amusing. And after looking at those photographs, because the first photographs I was actually nude, and I just had the striped fabric and the desert there. And then I started discovering that the less skin I showed, the more interesting I found the images. This is still the human form, which is very much part of my work. And I thought that was really cool. So it started that way. And then I started working with a photographer, a friend of mine, Love Mondo, and we would go to different places. I was invited to do performances, so I always brought a designated photographer with me. And it was really a performance for the camera. The people could enjoy it, but for me, it was more about finding these great angles and emotional gestures. That's what I try to work on, that it's a beautiful form, but that it may also possess some good emotional content.
Evidently, there's been a study where supposedly creative people like stripes more, and they tend to wear, people who think outside the box.
Well, I have, there is one performance that I've done that's called Experiments in Striped, Interruption in Stripes, where I'm actually wearing stripes and I have stripes projected on me. And there's a soundtrack of me reading from a book by Michel Pastoureau called A History of Stripes. The Devil's Cloth, A History of Stripes. And this is really an academic investigation of striped cloth. And it has often been associated with deviance, people who are not conforming to the norm. There's also even like, I mean, it's left up to interpretation, but in Latin, in the Bible or something like that, it was, thou shalt not wear a cloth of two, which could be interpreted as two different colors or stripes. I mean, apparently the earliest documentation of striped fabric is an image of prostitutes from the 13th century.
Would you like to do a little tour of your studio?
Right behind me, and of course it's backwards, I'm working on a performance installation, a major piece called It's All in Her Head, starring Amy G. Dalla. And that came out of just, thinking about fear and being master of my own universe, and wanting to see if I can train myself not to be afraid or to react differently to fear and emotions. So I don't know if you can see all of that, but I've got a swing here. This is a swing. that was part of an installation in Lancaster. There's LA. It's a beautiful room. I feel really good. I have some dresses here. These dresses are both part of or different iterations of a piece called A Piece of Me, where people can actually pull off a piece of the cloth and it exposes a photograph of my body, actually my nude body. And then I have some work here. During this pandemic also, it became clear to me about how we consume, and not just food or toilet paper, but just in general, the excess that we have. And I'm certainly not a minimalist, as you can see. And so I wanted to make work from what I have, you know, the materials that I already have here. So of course I had lots of fabric, I have lots of mason line, and I had all these frames that I've been collecting. So I started making this work. So this is actually spandex, the same stuff that I wear, and this mason line from the hardware store. So it's kind of like painting with cloth in a sense.
You think you'll ever stop making art?
No. I don't, you know, I talk about, you know, maybe retiring one day, but that would not be retiring from art. It would be retiring from everything else. And art keeps me alive. It really is one of my survival techniques, I would say. It keeps me balanced emotionally and intellectually. And that's how I also see my self-worth as a valuable member of society. I mean, art is so necessary and so valuable.
Why do you think art is necessary?
It's culture. It feeds us. Without it, we'd be savage, which is not a bad thing either, to be wild, but necessary. I don't know. It's like breath, creation. I think, you know, artists inspire the rest of the world to do things, to create things, to see things, to experience things.
And what advice would you give to other artists or young artists starting out?
Just do it. You can't listen to what everybody else says. If I did, I'd probably, you know, be an eye doctor in New Jersey or something like that, you know, which is not a bad thing, but it's not for me. So I think one has to believe in themselves, be open, listen, be open to learn, and express yourself. I think it's important to produce and not critique yourself all the time, and that might stop you from creating. You can always edit or destroy the work that you don't like, but honest expression is the most potent, you know, your own truth, even if you don't know what that is, you know, but not copying others, being influenced perhaps by others or inspired by others, but just do it. Make art. If you want to be an artist, then make art and go to museums, go to galleries, look at what's out there, and then close yourself off in a vacuum and do your own thing.
So tell me a little bit about your collaboration process.
Well, I you know, when I was younger, I had these grandiose ideas, you know, and saw Amy Kaps, concept by Amy Kaps, directed by Amy Kaps, costumes by Amy. And then when I was in film school, I realized when I collaborate with people, they interpret the idea in a way that I never thought of. And I realized how enriching that is. And a few years ago, when I started the Victus versus Living Stripes series, I was approached by a photographer, Eric Schwabel, and we were at a little community arts meeting, and he comes up behind me and whispers in my ear, "We should do something together." And I was like, ah! You know, claws out, not really claws out like that, but just grab onto this opportunity, because he's a fabulous, fabulous photographer. And our first collaboration took place in his studio, where, again, this was one of the shots. This won an award, One World, One Shot. And so we started this whole series of the striped world, first in his studio, and then we started going on location. And it's been an incredibly valuable experience working with him, or working with Lev Mondo, who edits most of my videos and helps me with sound a lot and the music. And right now I'm doing a lot of collaboration with my studio mate, Kay Freeman, working on videos. I was asked to curate a painting exhibition at the Museum of Art and History in Lancaster 3 years ago. And I thought, well, I know a lot of painters. I could just, like cook up a concept, but I loved her work and we have a really good rapport. And we were not studio mates back then. But we started working together and created an amazing, amazing exhibition called The Anatomy of a Painting. And we made a film attached to it. And it's just been really interesting. And the artist life can be very, I don't want to say lonesome, but I spend so much time alone, and that's really important as well. But to be able to work with someone else can be very exciting and inspiring and spur you on to do things that you might not do on your own. Another thing I wanted to say, because you asked about, if I have any advice for young artists or anybody young, number doesn't matter what your age is. I've come to the conclusion that it really doesn't matter what anybody else is doing. Be irreverent, be scandalous, and be respectful at the same time, and just do what you want to do. Basta.
That was my conversation with Amy Kaps that we recorded in April of 2021. This episode was produced by me, Natasha Maidoff, and was edited by Carlos Bergs.